Coming up, Brooklyn Nets basketball is alive and well at the Barclays Center. We break down why when you make a deal for Kevin Durant, you demand Mikal Bridges, the piece that Phoenix did not want to give up. We just found out tonight how valuable he can be. We break down the superstar performance coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo. Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there, you're going to find Doug Norrie, owner and operator of DFSR, for all your daily fantasy sports rankings from DraftKings to FanDuel. He's got you covered. I'm Adam Armbrecht, breaking down the New York Football Giants on the One Giant podcast. My boy Andy Mack, all off season long. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day, free on all those great platforms, and let you know this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. And Doug, Mikal Bridges just set the Clays on fire with a career performance just 4 games in to his Brooklyn Nets career.
Look, when you trade away Kevin Durant, you are hoping that you come away with something that you can really hang your hat on. That is always the goal whenever you trade away a guy of the superstar pedigree and caliber of Kevin Durant. And then you hear that they could have traded Mikal Bridges for 4 first-round picks. 80 picks would not have been enough, my friend. Make it 120 picks. Make it 240 picks. We don't want your picks. We don't want your first rounders or your swaps or anything like that. Not when you get 45 points and 17 for 24 from the field, 83% true shooting, 7 for 7 from the line. Got after on the defensive end. Also was cooking defenders like Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo in this one. I mean, I can't say enough. This was, it's easily the best game of his career. And one of the best, just frankly, one of the best efficient scoring nights in the NBA this year. The Nets have had a couple of these already on their team. I can't say enough, man. Like, this was a superstar performance through and through. This is what, I don't think we needed to see it, frankly, to feel pretty good about the Bridges part of this one. But when you do see it, it does make you feel, it makes you feel pretty, it can warm your hands over that fire, baby, because this one feels really good.
Yeah, 116-105. The Brooklyn Nets take care of the Miami Heat, officially winning the season series with their second win of the year. But to your point, man, Mikal Bridges, when you make deals like this, and you can go, we knew back in Phoenix when Booker was out, he stepped up and you got this glimpse of it. But he's 26 years old, right? So when you're thinking about what this player can be in the short and long term for the Brooklyn Nets, you're waiting for it. And these first 3 games have had, regardless of Bridges, just a lot of ups and downs. A game like this, which started from the tip, he was consistent in all 4 quarters, and then, especially in the fourth, taking over the game. And you mentioned about Miami is a very stout defensive team. They can throw a lot of different looks at you on that end of the floor, and Mikal Bridges was able to do it from the inside, from the outside, take guys off the dribble, create space for himself. It really did show the all-phase game, and we're only talking offensive right now, let alone the defensive side, which we'll get to. But it showed that this is a player that, not too bright of a light, not too big of a stage. And there's a real world here where over the back end of this season, we're going to see performances like this with consistency now that it seems like he's starting to get comfortable and get his legs underneath him in Brooklyn.
Yeah, it's funny. NBA teams, to really succeed, a lot of the times need hierarchies in sort of their shot distribution. It's important to have it because it allows players to sort of understand their roles, right? Like, really, really good teams will understand where that hierarchy is. Some will disperse it a little more than others, just because their player personnel. But the key is that you have to understand it, right? You need the other players to at least understand sort of what the top-down shot chart should look like. And when you have guys like Mikal Bridges, Cam Thomas to some degree falls into this as well when he's really cooking. We'll talk about him later. But when you have guys like this, it sort of becomes very obvious about what the game plan should be. And Bridges, is he going to drop 45 points every night? No. But is his game made up in a way that this kind of thing, at least a higher scoring numbers, with a different personnel around him and just a different team hierarchy, right? Like he wasn't part of this hierarchy before, whether it was playing with Devin Booker, he had DeAndre Ayton there. Chris Paul is a floor general who's going to find guys in the best spots, not always like force feed one player. The Nets are set up in a situation where we're clearly going to see the usage for him, I think, stay pretty high. And the key, to go back to the top, the key of the Nets, frankly, just not losing terribly on the Kevin Durant trade, because trading Kevin Durant is always super dicey / you almost are always going to lose it. The key to have a close to everyone feeling good about it in the end is Bridges being this guy. Like Bridges has to be this guy. He has to be a guy that they can feel good about shooting 20 plus shots a night, playing high 30s minutes. You already know he's one of the best defenders in the NBA. And if you have that kind of two-way guy, like you have a really good team, and it's just super encouraging to see. We can talk a little bit about like how specifically they changed some of their strategies, and maybe we'll talk about that a little later in the episode. But just in general, I think what we're clearly going to see here going forward is this hierarchy of shot distributions. Is like he's option one, right? And like he's option one, and then we'll figure out the rest of it after.
Yep.
But I think it's going to be pretty clear here about like what we're going to see going forward. And I think we should start expecting to see like 15, 20 shots a game from him kind of just going forward as part of the general plan of how the Nets like have a path to victory.
Yeah, and I want to build out on how the Nets effectively created those opportunities for Mikal Bridges. By the way, a lot of it was just him doing the work all on his own there. But at the 7:21 mark, just wanted to make a little note of this. The Nets are up 90-89 in this game. Mikal Bridges with the layup, so they get the lead extended out to 3. 7:21 mark. Mikal Bridges makes a 7-foot driving floater at the 6:51 mark. He also knocks down a 23-foot, which would be a three-pointer here, at the 6:22 mark. Mikal Bridges makes a driving layup at the 5:46 mark. Mikal Bridges, another three-pointer at the 4:56 mark. Mikal Bridges makes a 15-foot pull-up jump shot at the 4:16 mark. Cam Johnson squeezes in a triple there, and then it goes back.
That was a big triple, by the way. Sorry to interrupt you, but that one, I don't want to gloss over because we're not going to talk about Cam too much. That was like kind of the backbreaker, but go ahead.
Yep,
sorry.
it was, and to your point, we won't get to a lot of Cam Johnson today, but that was one of those, hey, your moment here to be the guy that helps bury teams, and very specifically being one of the two players brought in from Phoenix in this Durant trade really mattered. But what I'm highlighting there is there's a massive stretch in this game where it is all Mikal Bridges that creates the 1-point lead and then blows it up into a double-digit lead, which Miami tries to fight back in a little bit from, but ultimately Spencer Dinwiddie with a triple, Cam Johnson with a triple, and it really did highlight when you have Mikal Bridges, or a player of his caliber, that's what opens up down the stretches of games. You need someone that can take the ball in his hands, create for himself, be effective, get to the line a couple times late too, and then in those closing sequences, trust that the attention that he garners, right? What we always say, the gravity of a Kevin Durant, the gravity of a Kyrie Irving. Mikal Bridges is not on that level, but in this game, he was more than enough that the Miami Heat had to be so focused on him that all of a sudden you look at the rest of this roster and you know they're capable of knocking down big shots. But man, this is, if you are a Brooklyn Nets fan and the 1-2 start after losing Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, yeah, it was close against Philly, but there were some real ugly games here. You've been waiting for this. You've been waiting for specifically Mikal Bridges to let the fan base know, yes, I am capable of being that guy. And now you get to watch it going forward.
Yeah, it was the key. It was the key to see it happen. I think there's still going to be lumps along the way here just because the way the team is constructed. And that's fine, right? I think that's fine. Like, I think we understand where the season is. But yes, in terms of what Nets fans needed to see and really just feel great about, I mean, like, just take one, like, just like through the internet streets of what's happening here in Nets fandom. We see out there. We know it. I'm part of it. We're part of this. And it was like, hey, this is how you start moving on from a tough trade deadline, right? Like this is how you start
moving on.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is the healing process, right? Of a sports fan. This is sports. Being a sports fan is tough sometimes, and like, you know, great upheavals around your team are hard. Thankfully, not only did they get back, like, frankly, just he's a super likable guy too. Like he's just like,
his celebration is absolutely phenomenal.
Cam Johnson, they just seem like regular guys. I mean, like before the game, I mean, we'll get into more of this. Before the game, they were showing the community outreach stuff, like just the way they kind of just speak about coming to Brooklyn. That was already super encouraging. then you pile on 45 points, and then you're really, really sleeping well at night. All right. I know we're going to get into more of this. I want to talk a little specifically about some of the things they did strategically with this game as well. We'll get into that in a second. First, I'm going to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. The midway point of the NBA season is here now. It's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. I got all the B's and missed the first. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. You can bet on everything from the money line to points scored to threes drained. If you go over there right now, you can get a little, get in some all-star action. All right. You can go all-star game MVP. They have it going over here. Kyrie sat out this game tonight. I don't know what he's going to be. He's old friend Kyrie Irving is plus 750 all-star MVP. We already know he's starting. Maybe he's got something to prove. Plus 750 doesn't look too bad. Maybe you get Jason Tatum at plus 1,000. I'm trying to go a little deeper here. I know some of you are going to want to do the Giannis's, the LeBrons, the Joel. Come on, please. Let's get some wings. Let's get some ball handlers, and let's get some guys who are going to chuck. I don't mind Kyrie at plus 750 there for all-star game MVP. Just some of what you can grab over on FanDuel. Lets you combine bets too if you want to get a bigger payout. That's with the same game parlay. Don't miss a chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA.
That now marks the second time in as many episodes that Doug has referenced former Brooklyn Nets when talking about favorable bets. He'll adjust that going forward because he can start talking about Mikal Bridges. And
buddy, we didn't have any guys. There are no guys in the All-Star game. So what do you want me to do?
There's no one else to do. What are we supposed to do?
What do you want me to do? Make up a bet? Yeah, Mikal Bridges, he's plus 20 million to be All-Star game MVP.
Hey,
he's not in the All-Star game.
Nicholas Claxton to infinity, were he to have been in the All-Star game. You mentioned it there, though. I thought so. Again, with the way Mikal Bridges was playing, and I don't often reference something that I say over on Twitter, but I did say it in the first quarter when he had 9 points. I said, heads up, there is a Mikal Bridges coming out party in the process right now in this game. And I think it was pretty clear because unlike the previous 3 games from a team standpoint, there was a level of rhythm and consistency in what they were running that was affording Mikal Bridges to get into those looks, to get into those spots, and to find that rhythm. And I think a lot of it had to do with the play calls that were being drawn up by Jacque Vaughn, and then also the messaging that was being sent to other key players around Mikal.
Yeah, so one thing we actually talked about last game, because we actually specifically referenced that Bridges took like no shots last game, and Dinwiddie took a ton. Now, I actually don't have a huge problem with like higher usage Spencer Dinwiddie. I think there are going to be games where that's going to be fine. The problem I thought last game was not so much the Dinwiddie shots. It was that they weren't putting any other player in position to get favorable matchups coming off screens. We specifically talked, we were like, hey, maybe Mikal Bridges should be the screener, because if Mikal Bridges can be the screener, then he can actually come up, pistol action. We've seen him kind of Iverson cut across to get into like good spots. That's not screening necessarily, but it's movement in a situation, kind of trying to get into a spot on the floor for the ball. That was very clear tonight. He was the screener when Dinwiddie had the ball a lot. They were bringing him up higher to like just say, hey, this is going to be, we're going to get you like sort of top of the action early, right? Mm-hmm. And then we'll pick out which one of those matchups is going to be the one we want to attack. Just doing that alone allowed for 2 things. One, it allowed for better spacing. I thought the ball movement, even with the shot distribution for Bridges having such high usage, the ball movement was very good. This did not feel like this didn't feel ISO heavy. Did it to you?
No.
Like, right. So, okay. So when you think, because if you look at how many shots he took compared to the rest of the team, I mean, he took 24, Cam Johnson took 14, Thomas took 11, and no one else was like anywhere close to double digits. I mean, he took all the shots, right?
Yeah.
But it never felt like that, right? Because they were using ball movement and they were using screening actions to get them into much better spots for kind of him specifically. And once they knew he was cooking, it was every time.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, and I think this is like a really encouraging thing, because this isn't like, because with Dinwiddie, we saw it was dribble to the end of the shot clock, and then we'll see like kind of what we have here. Right. Like this wasn't that. This was favorable matchup, attack it. Favorable matchup, attack it. Right away. Get to the rim. And I think it was just so clear that they were just running just completely different actions here with the intent of making him the screener and getting him the ball.
Yeah, and I think that, we've seen this in glimpses over the 3 previous games, little stretches where you thought, hey, when they get out in transition, when you think about one of the things that I was remembering too is a guy like Cam Johnson is the athletic upgrade on both ends of the floor, obviously, that you don't get from Joe Harris. He's a perimeter shooter, but he's also obviously better defensively and offensively capable of having the ball in his hands, having the right matchup, and driving at the basket. There was 3 out of 5 possessions where Cam Johnson put the ball on the deck, went to the rim, drew fouls, and got to the line twice. And I encapsulate that inside of the Mikal Bridges volume of shots that he ends up taking because, to your point, there was never, like the 3 previous games, significant stretches where you thought, all right, what are we doing here? Spencer Dinwiddie's on the ball way too long. And maybe we'll touch on Cam Thomas in the 3rd segment and where his value lies and why I actually disagree with where the fan base has been trending around how he's being used, when he's being brought into games by Jacques Vaughn. But I think you need to have this rhythm. When you don't have the elite level Kevin Durant's, Kyrie Irving's, Luka's of the world, you need to have a consistency on the offensive end of the 2nd and 3rd pass, the ball movement. And then to your point about, matchups, remember, this is a team in the Miami Heat that has a lot of defensive assignments that can be difficult for the Brooklyn Nets. But if you continue to look for the extra feed, if you continue to run, and it's funny, going forward, that idea of having Mikal Bridges up as the screener is going to be, I think, a fascinating way to create additional looks. But I think at some point, you need to respect the 4 players outside of the Nick Claxton, outside of the Ben Simmons, or whoever's playing at the 5 for the Nets. You need to treat them as being a body that needs to rebound, put some opportunities down when they're there. Saw great connections between him and Mikal Bridges on a couple of lobs. One didn't quite get there. But so much of this was feeding off of trusting that if you execute the play, you're going to end up with a quality look. And tonight, as it should be more often than not, it should end up with Mikal Bridges being able to be the decider of, am I distributing? Am I attacking? Am I getting my look? So it was just a really well-balanced game. I know I'm getting long-winded around the idea of like a complete game. We talked about before we got on. This is an epic performance from Mikal Bridges, and all of the subparts also serve their roles perfectly, which is really important if you want to get across the line with a win and not sacrifice 45-point games and lose by 7 or 10.
No, I think you're right, because it's funny. We said this at the beginning where we say there's like 40 plus point games are built differently, right? Like there's different ways to get here. There are, where it looks like you're just on the ball the whole time. We're getting toward the end of the shot clock. You're taking every shot, right? You're just kind of heaving up. Like there are those kind of 40-point games. This was not that. I mean, like I said, 83% true shooting means you were ultra efficient, right? And this was it was just such an efficient game where the ball, I think strategically landed in his spot for good looks quickly, rather than just, hey, it's kind of you up the court, get a screen, get a switch, kind of it's move slowly. Let's get you into the action. Like
you end up with the ball.
Yeah, like exactly. Like there's just different ways to create it. I think in some ways, like Cam does this. It's not a knock. I'm just saying these are built different. These just games are kind of built differently, where it's like dribble around, dribble into congestion, don't like what you got, reset it yourself. Like that kind of stuff can sometimes happen when you have a guy with a certain scoring mentality. I actually think the fact that Bridges doesn't have that scoring mentality because of how he's played for so long, I think his mentality is, if I have something good, I'm going to take it. If I don't, I'm not. Right. Yeah. Like I think, and that is just a different mindset, because he's not a score first guy. He might end up being a score first guy at some point. But I think you always want to get players, if you don't have just like the straight up alpha superstar guy, right? Like if you don't have that guy, what you sometimes want is the guy who makes themselves into that guy because they were able to stay on the court for the other reasons first, right? Like defense or just smart plays. And that's what, go ahead.
No. Well, so the other thing, because I was thinking about this, you came out of the first segment. We already know what Mikal does on the defensive end. It makes me look across the other side of the court and think about a Jimmy Butler. Like, this is a guy who always hung his hat on being a great two-way player. They're built differently. They're different players. We understand that. And Jimmy Butler is not the best player on that team. It's going to be Bam Adebayo if you want to have the highest level of success. But I remember talking with you. We talked about it back when he went to Miami first, and it was like, oh boy, how successful can they be? And it was, well, it turns out when you have consistent players around them, when you have these other really good pieces, Yeah, having a guy that kind of built his reputation on being a great two-way player that makes the right basketball play and has a little bit of superstar mixed in there can actually lead to probably outperforming expectations on a more consistent basis than you might think. And that it popped in my head there in the first segment of like, I think that's a somewhat similar comp of where Bridges could grow into, having spent these years as the third best player on a lot of teams.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just grabbing guys at like this different part of their arc, right? Like, because it kind of comes differently for guys. He was not a superstar pedigree kind of guy. That's okay. He probably has an ultimate ceiling on what he is, but the fact that his game has clearly expanded beyond that with all the right baseline put in already after years of playing with the Suns and with guys like Chris Paul and just being asked to do the little things with to almost no fanfare, right? Like, that will set a different baseline for you as a player. Okay. Do you want to talk about Cam Thomas? We got a couple other things to get. I can see you nodding your head, buddy. You're nodding your head? You feeling good about this? What?
I'm not in my head because I know that when it feels right to be rooting for this team and be rooting for victories for Brooklyn with Mikal Bridges, it's also going to feel right if I wrap my hands around a Jeffrey Wright burrito bowl from Brooklyn Borough, because my God, it's delicious. It's exquisite. And I know you've got all the things we need to know about.
Look, Nets fans, if you are in the Brooklyn area, if you're leaving Barclays, or if you're just looking for lunch or dinner on the weekends or weekdays, you have to stop by our friends over at Brooklyn Borough. It's the best Cali Mexican food in the area. I can say this point stop just because we've eaten it. We've hung out with Pepe. We got the whole lay of the land. You do not know what you're missing if you're not headed over to Brooklyn Borough. 922 Fulton Street in Brooklyn. It's just a mile from less than a mile from Barclays. Delicious aromas. They got the taste that draws you in. They got the salsa bar that you're not going to even be able to walk away from. Tacos, bowls, quesadillas. They got a burrito named after our boy Joe Harris over there. Look, this is a Brooklyn Net friendly place with the food to back it up. Locked On Nets fans are going to get a free baby burrito with a purchase of a Mission burrito. You just have to tell them that you're a Locked On Nets fan when ordering. That's it. And they're going to give it to you. Free baby burrito with the purchase of a Mission burrito. That's Brooklyn Borough, 922 Fulton Street. Fresh meat. It's ready to go. They have house-made chips. The salsa's there. Ice-cold cervezas. You want to grab a margarita. It's all there for you at Brooklyn Borough, 922 Fulton Street. Order, unwrap, enjoy, unwrap more, finish, come back, smile. Brooklyn Borough. Tell them you're a Locked On Nets fan. 922 Fulton Street, Brooklyn Borough.
Every time you do it, I end up being hungry afterwards. Okay, so here's the other interesting thing that I think is worth closing out on. Cam Thomas and what has been a real sticking point ever since the trade went down. We all know the 3 games, over 40 plus points, fan base getting juiced up. We're going to see this kid explode. And now the ire is turned to Jacque Vaughn and saying, what are you doing? Why isn't he starting? Why isn't he playing 30 minutes a night? This guy can cook. And, 21 minutes, 6 of 11, 3 of 5 from deep, got to the line 4 times, 4 assists as well in those 21 minutes, 19 points. And I actually think that this is perfect for a lot of different reasons. First off, it coincides perfectly with Mikal Bridges putting himself at the top of the hierarchy, which I think the Brooklyn Nets and Jacque Vaughn weren't looking to hand the keys to the team to young second-year Cam Thomas just yet. And you're kind of able to build the rhythm of the game and then pick the spot where you say, Cam, go nuts. Go nuts for this burst right here, and let's see what you do. And I thought that Cam had a much better all-around performance in this game. There was a 4-possession sequence where he stepped into a knockdown triple off of a corner feed, had another 3-pointer, but also distributed to Joe Harris. I think found Mikal Bridges on another possession to set him up for success. So the all-around game is starting to perform here. But I do think that you do not want to end up running into the Spencer Dinwiddie hero ball that we got a little bit of. We know Cam Thomas is capable of that. So I actually looked at tonight's game and thought, this is exactly how you want to treat Cam Thomas, knowing that the goal here is for him to eventually be a starter on this team and to eventually have, which we saw in this game too, a 1-2 punch where Bridges and Thomas are both on the court. They both have to be respected defensively, and they're both capable with the ball in their hands of taking on almost any defensive assignment, attacking, and still finding a way to manufacture success from the outside, driving or getting to the line. Like, I think you want to build a successful superstar in Cam Thomas or whatever his ceiling is going to be. And there's no reason to rush it now. There's no reason to rush that process.
Yeah, this is funny. This is actually close because, and I will say, I've come full circle on Cam. We were not so much of a believer last year. We've been through this a few times, so I won't relitigate the whole thing.
Mhm.
But a big part of it was around, I mean, forget even the defensive piece of it, right? So, but a big part of it was around just if you're going to be a 6'3" guard in the league, you have to knock down triples. You have to. Like, it's just,
Right.
unless you're just like a super high assist guy, and even those guys are pretty few and far between. Like, you have to be able to knock down threes, and Cam just didn't want to and really couldn't last season. Now he's a 40% 3-point shooter.
Yep.
He's been like, he doesn't shy away. Like, he used to drive into traffic on closeouts. He doesn't do that anymore. Either quick pops or, well, he still will drive off on closeouts, but he'll just take the wide open three now. This is close. I think he clearly has earned the chance to play more minutes. Like, I think that he should be playing more than
low. Yeah.
I think he should be playing 20 plus minutes a game easily, right? I think that especially with the way this team is currently constructed, like, scoring is still going to be tough for him, like, for this team overall, right? It's nice to have this Bridges game. I still think points are going to be hard to come by for this team against in certain times. Mm-hmm. And Cam is kind of a break glass when you need it kind of dude for this. And so I do think, understanding there will be some games where the shots just aren't going in, right? Like, it's that volume. You get the 3 for 16 against Chicago. I get it. Like, that's just the kind of scorer he is. I think it's very clear that he needs to be playing like 24 minutes a game or something like that with this group. And just because he's doing all the things that we were like 40% 3-point shooter, and his shots aren't like catch and shoot threes all the time either. Like, these are tough shots. Like, some of these are just like create your own 3-pointer. I mean, these are not all 3-pointers are created equally, and his are created more difficultly than others. And if he's just going to shoot 40% from three, he just has to be playing. And I don't know if he has to be starting. And I agree, I think, mostly with your thesis, but like this, to me, this is kind of still the low end of his minutes. Like, he should be playing more.
No, I agree 100%. And I think, the point that you made there about it's going to be hard to come by scoring. So in that way, keeping him out of the starting rotation can make sense because you want to, no pun intended, bridge the gap from Mikal to the second unit and then coming back around, right? So, could you have seen him sooner in this game? Yes, but then you saw him in the third quarter with a real extended run. So I'd like to see more balance, certainly, but as long as the results are there, and to your point, as long as Mikal is going to give us 45 points, we'll be fine. But as long as you're seeing the balance from this team, then I really like the second half of quarters being Cam Thomas time. I really like, and it's not dissimilar. Don't anyone make the leap of what I'm about to say here. The way in which when Kyrie was on this team with Kevin Durant, it was what? Towards the back end of the second quarter, heading towards halftime. I'm going to start cooking. I'm going to start getting on the ball, right? At the back end of the third and going to the fourth, I'm going to start cooking. I'm going to start getting on ball. Let him have those runs. And then the other really nice thing, if we're just going to touch on to close out, the rotation, the new rotations and the new defensive value you have on this roster, it does mitigate a lot of the concern around having him on the floor and what it means defensively. Like that, it's completely different now than it was pre-trade because you've added in 4 players that are all defensive upgrades over 4 other guys on this roster currently. So I think that changes the dynamic too. It would have been harder when you have more elite scorers on this roster pre-trade than it is now. And you mentioned that about, his volume shooting. But if he can stay efficient, like you said, from beyond the arc, if he can keep his game under control and not get a little at time, a little bit lost in the sauce on it, then I think there's no reason. 25 minutes a game, be a heat check guy. I think there's real value here. And maybe it's going to be 3 games. Maybe it's going to be 7 games. I'd like to see it sooner than later, but his role will grow. And I think it's mostly, as we've been saying this ever since the trade, patience. This is now the 4th game. And guess what? We just uncovered a whole new layer of things that we really like about where this team is headed. You need to let it come to you game by game. Tonight, it was Mikal Bridges and becoming that leader potentially of this team.
Yeah, totally. I like that. I think we're probably starting to see a little bit, and I think I'll talk about this a little bit tomorrow as we lead into the All-Star break, is just how I think we're seeing a clear rotational shift now tonight too. Like 10 minutes from Curry. I know he was coming back from injury. 13 minutes from Harris. Like the other guy, Sharp, no Yuta, no Patty Mills. Like, I do think this is going to –
Royce O'Neal in closing lineup.
Yeah, and it's right. Royce closed over DFS. Like, I think, and like I said, I'll talk more about this tomorrow about what maybe to expect post All-Star break from rotations. I would expect a lot more of this and a lot less of those guys who are on the bench too. Like I just think that we're going to see a clear sort of generational shift to some degree also here, because I think that's just the way the team is trending now. And it's not just because of the win here with Miami. I think it just makes sense to play a lot of these younger guys too. And I think the results will be better also. So I'll talk about a little bit more about that tomorrow. Really appreciate everyone that is up here in YouTube. I have to say right now, I'm just going to refresh it really fast. If you're listening, we got there. Right on a refresh right there. It was at 4,999 subscribers on YouTube. I refreshed it before the episode ended. We got to 5,000. I did say that if we got to 5,000 today, the Nets would win the game. That one's on the record. We can stamp that one for posterity. That one's it's out there. It was right. We got to 5,000, the Nets won. There you go. It's just that easy. If you were listening on the podcast feed, go over and be 5,001 subscriber or 2 or 10 or wherever we are, because now it's a march to 6,000. I'm already sick of 5,000 and looking at it. Got to get to 6,000. Subscribe to Locked On Nets over at YouTube.
My friends, when you see a performance like this from Mikal Bridges, a guy that, could he be? Would he be? Should he be? It brings to mind one whose worth lies far within a diamond in the rough, in the rough, in the rough. That's Aladdin, boys and girls.
One of the all-time great poets. We will be back. We will be back again tomorrow, and in a second on YouTube with more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Oh, the podcast. What happened, man? You just fell apart there.
Oh, well, you just kept saying that line over and over again. It was cracking.
Well, because that's anybody who we'll get to hear Drummer Boy in a second. Anyone who's seen the animated Aladdin, it's that large sand lion, and as he collapses, it's in the rough. It echoes. It sticks with you. It earwigs. I haven't
seen Aladdin in 30 years or whenever it came out. I don't know if I even saw it the first time. Anyway, appreciate everyone being over here in YouTube.
Thank you, Drummer Boy.
Always fun after a win. Thanks, Drummer Boy, for saying congratulations. You get it, 5,000. I hope no one unsubscribed in the time that I did this. And 5,004. We're killing it now. Yeah, there we go. Woo! All right. So the thing with numbers like this, and then we'll get into net stuff. The thing with numbers like this is you hate to. You don't really want to get to 5,000. You want to get to like 5,005 because you need to break out the buffer for the person to unsubscribe, which always happens. So you need to get to like 5,005. Know you're feeling safe, and then you can, and you know that even if you say something dumb and a few people leave, you're still going to be over 5,000. So there you go. That's just a little bit of how the sauce is made.
So the other thing is then, I know you're going to talk about this, and the reason why Doug was saying he'll be talking about this is I'm not, I'll be taking an episode off on tomorrow's podcast for Friday, but Doug is going to take a look at these rotations, and I don't want to steal any of that thunder, but the one thing we didn't touch on, and just game specific in this one, was at the end there, Royce O'Neal over Dorian Finney-Smith. And it's funny, because when the trade happened, it was, well, remember, Royce O'Neal, he's brought in first-round pick to be around the superstars. What's his role going to be here? In a game like this where he came off the bench, 25 minutes, 3 of 4, 2 of 3 from beyond the arc. Like, it's just 8 points, but 3 rebounds, 4 assists. Like, his role and value is dramatically going to shift here. But as a veteran player that has two-way value, I actually think that he can carve out this type of role for himself going forward. And especially when you think about those closing lineups on a game-to-game basis, he can offer you really good defensive matchup value, even though we know that DFS is quality as well. I think he still has this role here. I don't want to steal your thunder, but is that going to be part of your analysis on the rotation?
I was actually going to talk more about the guys who didn't play. So I'm not worried. I actually think it's just the consolidation of power here among the guys who are playing. I was actually going to talk more about like Curry and Harris and guys like this, and just maybe what is going to happen.
Harris is on the slow burn. Like, I know Curry just came back, obviously, but if you look at, because actually Harris has gone the last 4 games, 21, 16, 17, 13. Like, it's a slow burn. He's knocking down some triples. That's cool. But you have what, 3-4 other guys that can knock down triples and do the other stuff. You have to
he's
assume
not going back to like 26, 27 minutes a game. It's not happening. Oop, I'm gonna open myself.
Hey, all right, pop the top, buddy. You carbonate that beverage yourself? I bet you did. So
What am I gonna pay for my carbonation at the store? No, please. I pay for it. I pay for it in the form of CO2 canisters.
Let's ask this question. Form of CO2. Let me ask this question. What do you think is a reasonable expectation for Mikal Bridges on a night in, night out basis? Like, it's not going to be 45
what do you mean, like
points.
what do you think, scoring wise?
Yeah. Like, is this a guy that we can go, because he scored 23, 24 the game prior. Is he a 30-point scorer consistently for the Brooklyn Nets going forward?
No, that's too high. I think, but like 24, 25, like a night. I actually don't think you want. I think for a few different reasons, you don't really want him probably being like a super, super high usage guy every single night. I think that like 25 points a game, 26 points a game, something like that is reasonable. And I just think like that's a reasonable expectation for him. That's really good, by the way. Like it's
yeah.
Like that's like that's
it.
I think it's really good. I think that in some ways, like he doesn't have quite enough on ball stuff to like really like get himself into every great situation. And so I think that like that's probably holds him back just a little bit. He's still good. I mean, his length is a problem for guys, even if he gets into the mid range. So like, I think he still probably has that in his bag. 25 points, something like that, I think is a reasonable expectation. I don't think he's going to enter that elite group, and I've been wrong about this stuff before. So I'm not exactly sure, but that's kind of what I think. I mean, do you have a higher expectation for him? I sometimes like to temper these things because I just think basketball is hard like every single night. And so
and it's funny because like I go back and look at the Philly game. That's like a really good 34 minutes, 8 of 18. It's a good shooting night, right? 44% from the field, 3 of 5 from deep. That was 23 points, right? And got to the line 4 times. I think the interesting thing, I think that would be the difference maker here, and this is, maybe no one will find this sexy, but he got to the line 7 times tonight and knocked down every single one of them. He's a really good free throw shooter. So the needle mover between being like 23 and 24 versus 27, 28, and maybe getting closer to being a 30-point scorer, I think is going to be that. And tonight's game, even beyond all of the volume, was that he showed it in all phases. And I think that that's the difference. Can he do that consistently? And I was pretty encouraged by the fact that he did it against Miami, because it's a good defensive team, the good matchups they can put on him, and he was still able to perform. But I won't set the expectation of a 30-point score, but I'll say it's not out of my realm of possibilities, depending on how they develop.
Okay, let me just ground this in some reality real quick, because there's only 7 guys in the league that average 30 points a game. So like right, just starting there, and there's only, if you score 24 points a game, you're in the top 20 in the league. This is kind of where I'm saying like about just like probably it's never a good idea to set long-term expectations for a guy right after they scored 45 points, making every shot. Like
I'm asking for 15 less than tonight, Doug. Just 15 less.
But I do think that's why I was like 23, 24. What did I say? I said 24. I'll probably even guide that down a little bit. So like something like 23, 24 points a game would be like, that's I'll just tell you who's in that area right now. So that area right now, 24-point games is like Levine, Paul George. It's a little weird because his minutes have been kind of up and down. Anthony Edwards is 24.7, right? Like other guys
like
in this Lauri Markkanen, who's going to win like comeback player of the year, is like 25 points a game. So Siakam's 25 points. I'm going for like wings, right? Like kind of wing guys like him. Butler's at 22. That's a little weird because
a nice comp. I like that.
Yeah. So anyway, those are like the wing guys that are scoring in that range. And so I think, like I'm going to guide mine down to like 23 points a game. Now I think for him, with the difference with him around than some of the other guys that I mentioned is that he probably will have the opportunity to take as many shots, maybe even more shots than some of these guys going forward, because if he just is like the number one option on the team, like, Levine sharing the court with DeRozan, let's say, right? Or even Vooch, or Markkanen having to play with like, Jordan Clarkson, and now Colin Sexton, who's going to want to take shots. Like, I think he has the opportunity to take as many shots as those guys, maybe, right? And I think if he's going to do that, then the scoring can be there. I just wanted to ground that a little bit in just like NBA reality, because those numbers are pretty bullish.
Yeah, and like if I said like 25 points a night for him, the other big part of it is
If
going to
he
be
scores 25 points a night, like that, he's a superstar.
right.
Like I think like that's what you're looking. Then you say that he's a superstar. Maybe we feel comfortable trying to get there. I don't know.
Yeah, and also it's like tonight it was all him. It's high volume. How everybody else plays around him is going to matter, right? Because now in the next couple of games going forward, we don't expect it to be that same volume and 45-point scoring. But guess what? Other defenses are going to say, well, what if we take away Mikal Bridges? What if we run blitzes at him, right? What if we treat him like a superstar, like a 30-point scorer? Can you guys knock it down around him? Can you can you create your own shots and get those looks to go? Can you make the right passes? If so, then teams will have to back off. So that's going to impact, regardless of him being 30 points, 25 points, 23 points, it's going to impact his production night in, night out if the team can't continue to play balanced basketball.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that part of it. It's just sometimes hard to kind of just contextualize where these guys end up being. Oh, this was a funny quote, by the way. Nets have no stars. Every podcast is going to be different, ups and downs. And there was another not so nice thing Xavier B said right after this, which I'm not going to highlight. But in this case, I actually think this is true. Like the ups and downs will be there. I think Adam and I are pretty good about not making huge long-term judgments about one game. I think we've always been really, really good about that. But I agree with the ups and downs piece of this. I think that like, we were down after that Knicks win. This is going to take time. And then they win, against the Heat and you feel pretty good about it. And Bridges shows flashes. And I think each game you kind of like, it's like this little graph that goes. And then over time, like you see the ups and downs. It's like, it is up and down after every game because that's just the nature of sports. But I think we can probably see what like the long range graph is also. And I think in this case, the long range graph is going to kind of point consistently upward, even if for some of these guys, consistently upward, even if the sample sizes, the short-term sample sizes sometimes won't look as good as 45 points on 83% true shooting, right? That's not going to happen again.
So by the way, like just before you get to the next question or comment, like how are you feeling it's 4 games? You didn't have Mikal and Johnson for the first one there. They've only had 3, but it's 4 games. It's Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, and Miami. And the new look Brooklyn Nets are 2-2. And they beat Chicago and they beat Miami. And by the way, those are teams that are behind them in the standings. It's like not insignificant there. Like I'm at least feeling like, yeah, this team is a team that's going to win basketball games over the back end of this season. We thought that pretty quickly just from looking over what the roster was going to be. But I really thought that like I am buoyed by who they've been playing and how they've played in obviously the 2 wins and even the loss against Philly. So it does get me excited for just watching the next 24, 25 games here and seeing how this gels and seeing how these rotations gel.
I actually think I feel exactly the same now as I did after the trade. I actually think this has played out pretty much exactly as I thought it was going to. And I mean, Adam knows me really well. I don't change my mind about stuff, and I'm very honest about what I think my previous opinions were. I think, right? Would you agree with that?
Yes, but to be fair, I also think you are a serial liar. So it's hard to kind of gauge. No, I'm kidding. No. Right. Doug is both very good at stating what he thinks about something, having a conviction around it, and then also being willing to say like, well, I was wrong. Like Cam Thomas is a good example. I think like I held on to that train a bit longer on what he could be, and then I faded. Like I faded at one point, but there was no part of you that was like, well, I can't possibly back off of this stance. Cam Thomas is still going to crash and burn. Yeah.
So go back to your original question. My feeling about them is still the same after this game as it was after the Knicks game, as it was after the first game, which was like, this is actually exact. I think in some ways this was very predictable. I was like, they are going to some nights play amazing defense. They are going to struggle to score unless they can get some guys just completely cooking. There are going to be times when it's going to be very tough for them to score. That's just the way their personnel is. Even with this Bridges game, that has not changed my overall view of this team's going to struggle with scoring at times. And I think that like they're a fun team to root for. I think that they cannot win a playoff series if they're like the lower seed, which they're going to be. And I just think that's where they are. And I would love for it to be wrong because I would love for them to, really scrap and win a playoff series like that. And I think the future is bright. I think they did the right thing. They built around sort of the right pieces to get better later. But this is pretty much exactly how I felt after the trade. And long term, I don't think I've changed my feeling at all.
One thing worth noting here, obviously it's the All-Star break next week, and Doug and I were already discussing how are we going to approach it, what are we going to talk about. I think there will be a fun conversation because we said, hey, listen, we're going to watch the team, see how they develop, see what happens over the back half of the season. But we will take the step outside of it and say, hey, fast forward to the offseason, fast forward to game 1 of next year. Where is this team? What have they accomplished? Where did value lie with certain guys, et cetera? What have they done with all the draft capital that they've accumulated? And that's what to your point, I still feel mostly the same. I am absolutely ecstatic that Mikal Bridges went off like this in a game like this, showing that he's capable of doing it. And now it's about evolving what I think would be really great to go and try to add to this team after you refine the rotations, after you confirm what you want to keep around here. So that's going to be a fun piece too.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think they built around the right pieces here. I think they'll, it depends. The Simmons thing is still a lingering question. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. I think they have interesting pieces they can swap out later. I want to actually address this real quick.
Yeah.
He's a restricted free agent after this year, Cam Johnson. So they'll be able to match. I'm almost positive. I'll double check.
They're already talking about what Phoenix wasn't willing to do with him over a 4-year contract and what Cam Johnson's expectations had been. And that's what the fan base is asking now is, I think it was 4 for 72. They wouldn't go beyond that. They wouldn't go to that mark. Will the Brooklyn Nets look at Cam Johnson as being a guy that's worth that amount of money in the offseason?
One thing about Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges that we should just mention here is that they're not exactly young. These guys kind of are late bloomers. And so they're both 26. And so that's not exactly super young, to be starting to build a team around that are getting, now I think they're getting better. Right. But these aren't 22-year-old guys. So the reason I'm mentioning it in there is because sometimes with these dudes, when their names sort of start to get elevated at a certain point, when you haven't maybe heard their name called a lot for a while, the thought can be, oh, they're super young, right? It's remember this, we went through this with LeVert all the time. It's oh, they should trade LeVert for Beal. It's hey, dude, they're the same age. Why were the Wizards?
Right. Why would the Wizards? Getting Spencer Dinwiddie. I was Spencer Dinwiddie, 29.
This is what I mean.
What happened? Blink of an eye, Dinwiddie's almost 30.
You can make yourself think that the Nets are super young because these guys are all kind of still seems like their graph is pointed upward, but they're not exactly young by NBA standards. Yeah. And so I just want to have everyone keep that in mind.
Can I, before you get to the next thing? So I'm watching this game early and you just mentioned Simmons and he comes in, he plays 5 minutes and he had 2 rebounds.
First subbing off the bench though. Sorry.
Yep. 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 points. And I was like, man, hey, you know what? If you can repeat that over a 20-minute sample size of a game, well, we're talking about 8, 8, and 8. And listen, in this iteration of Ben Simmons, I take it 8 days a week. And I had to go over and check because I knew that when I looked up and I saw that after 20 minutes, so he got there on the sample size, the problem was got to 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 points. It was just a bummer. It was real deflating because that's enough. In that initial 5 minutes, it was, well, he's not making the mistakes. He's kind of staying out of the way offensively. He's not, dragging things down. He's not getting caught in no man's land. It's yeah, just kind of don't be a problem and then touch in at a little points, but he just couldn't find it consistently. And we don't have to bother, talking more about that right now. I know you did.
Airball.
Go check it out. Great episode from Doug yesterday, breaking down Ben Simmons and the state of his game.
The airball, the floater too. Look, I actually think that
I know, but I was happy that he took it.
Me too. That's what I was actually going to say. I was one, I actually liked, and I said at the time, I liked that he was the first sub in off the bench. I would just do this the whole time. Just forget the Aaron Sharp. Just play him as the backup center. Yeah, you're going to get crushed on the boards. You're going to get killed. You're going to get killed rebounding anyway. So just get killed rebounding. It's a little different with Miami because they're kind of wing heavy and Bam plays the 5. And then after him it's Haywood Highsmith at the 5 or whatever. So I they could get away with it a little better with Simmons, but just do this every game. Play him as the backup center. If he stinks, he stinks. Whatever. There's no other way out of this. Just play him all the minutes. And if it's terrible, it's terrible. But I actually think it would get better. I don't know. I tell you where it's not going to get better if he just plays 9 minutes a game. Like that,
Yeah,
that'll never get better. And
I think you can test these waters without impacting the overall game, right? Bring him off the bench for 5, see how it goes. Bring him in for 5 here because you're going to have to spell it to your point. You're going to have to spell Claxton at some point. Okay. And quite frankly, if it's 15 minutes one game and 5 for Sharp and then 20 and none, you can play with that on a matchup to matchup basis. But I think you have to at least keep giving some sample size to see if it can grow. Hit one of your other start comments here. And then I do want to make another comment that we didn't get to about Mikal Bridges with Nicholas Claxton.
Most of mine were jokes. Like this one, I've been in furious agreement with Adam today. Charles rang in with this one a bunch, which was making me crack up every time I read it. I love furious agreement because all I was thinking about Charles sitting there and just like nodding his head so furiously at everything you said, like just like so happy. That was all. He said this like 3 times, and I cracked me up every single time. So I love it. I just wanted to make sure I got in there. I'm going to talk about this tomorrow a little bit. Concerns about Claxton's production with other superstars around him. I had made this point earlier in the year when he was on the Ascension, and they actually made it on the broadcast tonight because Jacques Vaughn mentioned it, which was, this is another thing people forget. Like earlier in the season, he's finally eclipsing it now. He's played more minutes this season than he has the rest of his career combined. And again, credit to us. We figured this out a long time ago about like sort of just what the big change for him was, which was, hey, just gets to play more and like, galaxy brain, you get better when you play more. But but they did finally mention it tonight as maybe a source of fatigue for him. And so I'm not surprised.
No, and just so you'll talk about this more, but the thing that I liked in tonight's game, because we mentioned this after the trade, was, well, now these new players, Dinwiddie had said, hey, he was there, infancy of Claxton's career, wasn't playing a ton yet. But like Mikal Bridges tonight, first couple of glimpses of, oh, I've got a guy that I can lob some balls up to the rim to here. Like Claxton gave him go ahead and put it up there. Connected on one, missed on another. But I do think you're going to see that too. Like even Cam Johnson, I look at him and I like the fact that he got downhill a little bit more in this game, really attacked at the basket. There was a high screen set out at the top of the key. And instead of coming around that and pulling up, had a number of 3-point attempts, obviously, in this game, but he came around that corner and drove downhill. There's going to be dump off opportunities. There's going to be chances for Claxton to still be effective offensively, but now he has to wait for all these new guys to kind of, recalibrate with him. So I'm excited to see how those relationships grow. And I agree with you that I think this is maybe a mild blessing in disguise. If we want to say, we're fringe benefits of trading away superstars. Well, we don't have to run Claxton into the ground now because you needed to if you were going for a championship. He's as critical as anybody behind the superstars. Now you can say, hey, man, we can kind of hedge ourselves a little bit. Give you 25 minutes. Stop playing you 30 plus over a handful of games to kind of settle you down a little bit.
And like, Claxton really benefited from KD, especially. Like they had a very good a very underrated 2-man game. And where KD, because KD could get into the mid range, Claxton could come up for like half a screen and then he would slip. And we saw KD get a lot of assists to Claxton this way, right? Because guys would scramble to blitz KD in foul line extender or whatever, and then Claxton would just be open rolling to the rim. Like the Nets don't really have anybody that can do that now, and so even like Dinwiddie's like spread pick and roll, the kind of like tendencies aren't really going to work here. And so I just think that he just benefited so much from having those other guys. And the Nets don't have like that personnel anymore. And so his numbers are going to drop here a little bit just because they don't have the right personnel for his game. So I think that's not going to be, I don't think that's just going to be surprising. It doesn't like change my evaluation of him at all.
No, for sure. I happen to see, I caught this one here. I'm assuming, Dwayne, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you're referring to Ben Simmons experimenting with him, starting him at the point guard over Dinwiddie and pull him if it's not looking good, unless you have to be referring to him because he can't be referring. You wouldn't be.
Could be Cam Thomas.
Yeah, I guess it could be, but I wouldn't really think
I wouldn't do either. I would just start Dinwiddie over.
Yeah.
I would definitely start Dinwiddie over Simmons.
Yeah, because and again, now you can make, if you wanted to have the debate about Cam Thomas, you can at least have that debate because he can shoot, create for himself, outside shot, can facilitate as long as he's being balanced. But Ben Simmons, you start him at the point guard, and that means that you're effectively taking away anything in the late shot clock, being able to say, hey, you're on the ball, make something happen. It wouldn't work out in that regard. But confirm if
they would never score. I thought this is never happening. This is never going to happen. People have been saying this since the day he was drafted. He's not going to just start shooting shots. It's never. I'll tell you right now, it's never happening. I say that with so much conviction. He is not going to ever do it. Like
No.
I would bet so much money on this. Like
It's more likely that Day'Ron Sharpe becomes a mid-range perimeter shooter before Ben Simmons ever does.
I just know because that has been the what people have talked about since basically like his first season, and it's never happened.
Yeah.
So like that's just not gonna that's not gonna change the spots now. Like it's just not happening.
Do you think that I don't want to spend like so much time on Ben Simmons, but he is such an enigma. Do you think that like treating him, the question about like playing him at the point guard potentially, but now if they're going to treat him as like the backup 5 to Nicholas Claxton, then you almost like, hey, set the screen at the top of the key, roll to the basket. Like really, we know that you have the ability to facilitate the offense, but don't bother. Because because frankly, your real value is if you can get some rebounds, if you can roll to the basket, get some easy looks around the rim. This thing of you being on ball is for the most part, the sample size says it's been a detriment in the totality of what the game is. And even though the Nets need point guard help, need ball handling help, I'd rather just be like, dude, like that's what you are. Like you're far closer to a Nicholas Claxton, Day'Ron Sharpe than you are to a Spencer Dinwiddie, Cam Thomas, you know, in that spectrum.
I would be happy actually. We talk about this so many times. Maybe we'll just get out of here after this. Although more people are coming into YouTube now, but I would be happy with actually what he does now, which is dribble, like these dribble DHO things where he kind of sets this like sort of moving screen where he kind of just like widens his legs and then tries to get the shooter to come up over top of him and kind of hopes that I think the shooter. Frankly, I hope the guy just shoots over the screen because he doesn't want to roll to the rim. Like what he should be doing there is setting the screen and then kind of tagging that screen and then going to the rim really hard. He never does that because he doesn't want to go to the rim. If he would just do that, like if he would just try a roll, like a short roll every once in a while off of, and you can picture what I'm saying, right? Like he gets the ball, he turns his body sideways to the basket. So you already know he's not going to the basket against the defender, right? But if he looks for guys coming around these curl actions where he can just kind of hand them the ball. He can stand there and set this little mini screen. And I know for a fact that he's dying for that guy to shoot because that's like the end of the action. Now, if the guy doesn't shoot, what he should be doing is, like I said, sprinting to the rim as much as possible there. Frankly, he wouldn't even have to shoot two because he would just pass out of the short roll. This is what Bruce Brown did all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like he'd pass out of the short roll and like he'd make a read. So
imagine if they still had Bruce Brown right now.
What's that?
Like, remember when we talked about how they chose to bring back Patty Mills and didn't bring back Bruce Brown? Imagine a world where they traded away these stars and you still had Bruce Brown. Like burying Ben Simmons would be so much easier if you had a Bruce Brown on this team. Like I'm always going to.
He probably would have been traded.
I know. Well, by the way, he probably would have been a part of the package. Or yeah, exactly. But it's just funny.
So with him, I would just like to see like attacking those actions where he turns the corner, like hey, every once in a while, don't hand the ball off and turn the corner. Like, but even these, my expectations are really low for this stuff right now. So I don't know.
It was just so funny because I do remember also as well in this game that exact thing you described, top of the key, turns himself sideways to the basket.
Every time
he did it. There was nobody there. Like he ran the motion as if there was a defender pressing up on his hip and he needed to curl away and distribute to the outside. There was nobody there, but he still curled around and with no one in front of him with 7 to 10 feet of clear path to get into the lane, get into the paint. He was like, and dish, which that is and we said this before, but that's the most damning thing is that he fundamentally is not even capable right now of assessing what's happening, which really means that like he's going through the motions of basketball. He's not playing in real time and like assessing what's happening on the court. He's given himself a construct actively or passively. And that's the game script that he holds himself to. If I'm at the top of the key, man, I rotate, I get the ball out of my hands because I don't have any thought process around assessing what's in front of me between me and the basket. Anyway,
my expectations just on that are still low. I don't know. But I want to be, I would love to be, this was the thing I would love to be the most wrong about. Believe me, no one wants to be wrong about Simmons more than me. I want him to be really, really good. I was watching a video of him the other day of like his second year in Philly. It was like freaking awesome. And I remember that because I don't know, before I started doing, I just was kind of like NBA agnostic before doing this podcast. And I would watch a lot of Sixers because he was just kind of fun to watch. And like, that's the part that bums me out. So hopefully it gets better.
I know we'll get out of here. But let's, we talked about when it was Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, we said, and if Ben Simmons can ever get to anything close to the version of what he once was, that's what gets him over the line to being, winning a championship. Like if we kept dreaming on, if Ben Simmons can get back to that X percentage version of what he once was, what would that mean for this team? Like, what would that mean for the new core of this team if Ben Simmons was 80% of the player he once was? Would that take them from being a, first round 6-7 game series losing to, hey, we're in the 6th or 7th game of the second round of a series? Like, because there has to be that needle move if he actually ever got back into form. It's a fun mental exercise because we applied it the same way when it came to Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving.
I mean, if he went back to like, at least like looking athletically like he did in Philly, I think they would lose a 6 or 7 game series to a good team. I think that's just probably where they are. He's just not dynamic. Like even the athleticism, he's still not dynamic enough of as a basketball player for like good long-term winning. Like if they don't have an elite score, like probably 2 elite scoring options on the team. So, we all
know we do. We all know that.
I look, they'd be better for sure. They would not be a great team. Like he's not at a point now where he takes you from average to great. He takes you average to better, right? But I think that's kind of it.
Let me close that on this. I'm in furious appreciation of everybody over on YouTube that helped get us over that 5,000 mark. It really, we say that all the time, and it's legitimate, and we fully mean it, man. Like growing this thing the way that we have, especially what we've seen on YouTube over the course of this season, and then even around the trade, we were like, hey, man, those fair weather Kevin Durant fans, guess what? For every Kevin Durant or Kyrie stan that came and went with their time in Brooklyn, 2, 3, 4, 5 true diehard Brooklyn Nets fans, New Jersey Nets fans showed up and got onto this thing. So I just, again, really appreciate everybody supporting us.
Yeah, I second that. It's been really, really great. This is always the toughest part of the podcast is getting out of YouTube when there's so many people here. Like, believe me, this is the hardest part is logging off when we see, 200, 300 people still in there listening. It doesn't feel great to do it, but at some point you got to cut this thing off because you got to post the podcast and you got to sleep and you got to do these other things that are just sort of prerequisite for life. So I will just parrot what Adam said. I really appreciate everyone being here. I'll be back doing a solo pod tomorrow, and then we'll be here throughout the All-Star break also going over some, what to look for the Nets as well. Be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.